My name is Matt Dumas. Great to see you guys this weekend. Have any of you been on like a long trip before? I'm not talking about just down to LA. That doesn't count, even though traffic can make it feel like it is. Or even San Diego. I'm talking farther than that. Not even San Francisco. I mean, if you take Highway 1, it's a beautiful drive, but that can seem like a long trip. But I mean like the multiple day trip where you leave and you got to be in the car for a long time. Anybody done that? Okay, so we came out from Texas, so when we would drive back in the early years, we've learned not to do that. But when we do that in the early years, it's a 24-hour drive from our front door to Wendy's parents' house. Now, how long should that normally take a person to drive 24 hours, you think? How many days should you take? 5 days? Wow. We did it in one. Don't tell anybody. We weren't supposed to, but it's just, I hated that drive. Hate's a strong word. I know I shouldn't use it. I disliked that drive very much. The worst, though, is when I've taken a trip to Nepal or India or Indonesia where it's 24 hours in a plane. Now, if you think it's bad in a car, in a plane it's even, you're tight and there's no place to go. Like you can't get up and go anywhere. You're kind of stuck. And so for someone who can't sleep on a plane, it's really, really kind of a horrible thing. And I don't know about you, but if those things people talk about, it's not the destination, it's the journey. They're lying. I mean, those things, you don't care. You just want to get there, right? That are we there yet? That doesn't even count. Today, as we continue our story in the book of Acts, we're going to see Paul finally make it to Rome after 2 weeks at sea and 3 months on the island. So please turn to Acts chapter 28 and let's pray. Father, we thank you for today and for the opportunity to be in your house, to worship you, Father, to sing songs of praise, to remember what Jesus did through communion. Lord, I thank you for the baptisms that we get to see, even on a video week after week, just a reminder. We think it's just normal that people do that all the time, but really is a unique thing that you're doing here at this church. And I pray that your Spirit would continue to work to change lives and to bring folks into the kingdom. As we spend time in your word today, I pray your Spirit would have freedom to move. And Lord, as we look at Paul's life once again and the ups and downs, the storms that you've brought him through, the challenges that you have been there all along. And that we would see in our own lives, whatever you have us in right now, that, Father, you are still there. Even though you may seem far away, you have never left us, you've never forsaken us. We pray these things in Jesus' name, amen. Let's take a look at verse 1. When they had been brought safely through, then we found out that the island was called Malta. The natives showed us extraordinary kindness, for because of the rain that had set in, and because of the cold, they kindled a fire and received us all. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened itself on his hand. When the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they began saying to one another, "Undoubtedly this man is a murderer, and though he has been saved from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live." However, he shook the creature off into the fire and suffered no harm. But they were expecting that he was about to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But after they had waited a long time and had seen nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and began to say that he was a god. Last week we saw that Paul's journey to Rome was going to be anything but boring. And though there were several close calls, God said, and he did what he said. He brought him safely through and all of the folks that were traveling with Paul. 276 of them. All of them brought safe to the island. Every last one. As God said, so he did. Right? His word can be trusted. They find out the name of the island they're on is called Malta. I think we have a map of it. I don't know about you. I'm kind of getting old. That Malta is that little, there we go. Thank you guys. There's Malta right there. Now, Malta is just south of Italy, you can tell right there. And the folks that live on the island of Malta are unlike the folks that Paul has seen on all of his missionary journeys. Normally, he's run into folks who are either Greek or Roman. But these guys, they're Phoenician, which means that from a Greek perspective, they were considered barbarians, not uncivilized, just non-Greek. But these barbarians, these non-Greeks, show Paul unusual, extraordinary kindness. And you can imagine after 2 weeks at sea, battling the storms and the waves, that the kindness that the islanders show them is a welcome kindness. It's the kindness of God that they get to experience. Now, any of you guys ever been camping before? Now, if you're talking about the RV stuff, you've already gone way beyond most of us, right? So you're in a whole different thing. Your house goes with you wherever you go. I'm talking about the tent camping. Anybody done tent camping when it's cold and wet outside? What's the best thing when it's cold and wet outside and you're tent camping? Inside your vehicle. A roaring fire, right? It's getting to sit around the fire and you get to tell stories and roast marshmallows and make those things s'mores. You guys getting hungry yet? Yeah. Yeah, and so you're sitting around, you're telling stories, and you have this big raging fire for 276 people, or maybe you have a lot of small fires, but what happens when a fire burns for a while? It starts to burn out, right? And so you got to get more firewood. And Paul says, hey, I'm the guy, I'll go get some firewood. And so he starts to pick up some sticks out. And what time of year was this again? Do y'all remember? Winter time. Winter time. Hot or cold in the winter? Okay, cool. Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page. Little biology lesson. Any biologists in the room? Okay, good. You guys will believe whatever I tell you now. So, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, snakes, are they warm or cold-blooded? Cold-blooded. Now, what does that mean? Not that they're mean. What does it mean? That means that the outside temperature regulates the inside temperature. So if it's cold outside, they are cold inside. Now, if it's really cold outside, then they're really cold inside. And believe it or not, that a snake that's really cold can actually look like a stick. And Paul picks up a snake that looks like a stick. Now, when he's carrying this bundle of firewood to put on the fire, guess what happens when that snake that looks like a stick gets close to the fire? The stick turns into a snake. And this time it's a viper. That sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? A viper is very poisonous. And you know what that viper does? He doesn't want to get in the fire, so he grabs hold of Paul's hand with his fangs. That's kind of scary, isn't it? And as he holds on to his hand, all the islanders are going, man, this guy's about to die. What does Paul do? Shakes it off into the fire. Oh, poor snake. Just kidding. I don't care about snake. Anyway, so the islanders, they see this happen to Paul, and their conclusion is he escaped the ocean, he escaped the storm, but the goddess Justice, they personified justice as a goddess, and they said she's not going to allow him to live because he must have done something really, really bad. Right? And they're thinking the goddess Justice would always win in the end. It didn't matter if you escaped this one situation, she would hunt you down until she got her revenge or until she got justice. Now, it's kind of interesting. Some would say because Paul made it out of the ocean, and especially in a miraculous kind of way. I mean, the ship's gone. They're all swimming to shore. They've kind of this huge storm that people would say, wow, if this happened this way, then somehow this guy must be innocent, right? The gods have shown that whatever he's accused of, he must be innocent because they brought him safely to the shore. But then he gets bit by a snake. So now they change their mind and go, no, he's not innocent. He must be guilty because the snake bit him. But then he survives the snake bite. And so now what are they going to say? He must be a god. He must be a god. And we look at that and we go, man, these guys are crazy. They're kind of backwards in their thinking. But it's a reminder. Remember in Genesis chapter 3 when our parents ate of the forbidden fruit and sin and death became part of our story, the thing called the fall. That when we fail, all of us fail. We didn't just die spiritually, we didn't just die physically, but we died intellectually and we died emotionally. That every part of us was broken at that point. And so as Paul says, we're darkened in our understanding. And so we look at our circumstances and we begin to grope around and trying to figure out and make sense of the circumstances in our world and explain them. No wonder. You see, only Jesus can restore us to a right way of thinking, to see the world as God designed it to be seen. And it's only as we spend time with Him and His Word. Because you see, this circumstantial view of the world, it's predominant in our culture. Right? That my circumstances, or better, my perception of my circumstances, are what determines what's true. Right? And if that's the case, if my circumstances are going to define truth, that means that truth is kind of a revolving door. It's a spinning top. It's a roller coaster, goes up and down and twists and turns, riding the wave of popular opinion. Right? That there really is no truth. It's all delusion. Whatever your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth. That's not truth. There's only one capital T truth. Right? It's what God said. And the only way we know what God said is by His Word. And that's why one of our marks of a disciple is daily devotion, spending time in God's Word, because that's the only way we can renew our minds to see things rightly. Let's take a look at verse 7. Now in the neighborhood of that place were lands belonging to the leading man of the island, named Publius, who welcomed us and entertained us courteously 3 days. And it happened that the father of Publius was lying in bed afflicted with recurrent fever and dysentery. And Paul went in to see him, and after he had prayed, he laid his hands on him and healed him. After this had happened, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases were coming to him and getting cured. They also honored us with many marks of respect, and when we were setting sail, they supplied us with all we needed. As the chief man on the island, this guy named Publius, it's kind of a funny word to say, kind of probably funny to hear, so we'll just call him Mr. P. He's the leading guy on the island, which means that he is not only the wealthiest man on the island, but he's kind of the de facto governor of the island. He's the guy that if you need anything, you go to him. That the Romans, if they were going to have any interactions, they would talk to Mr. P. He's the guy. Now you might wonder how wealthy this guy is. How many people are on board the ship? Do y'all remember? 276. And he entertains them for 3 days. That's a lot of food, isn't it? Right? That's a lot of grub for him to courteously entertain people for 3 days. That's a lot of food. That's Mr. P. Well, his dad gets sick with what is most likely Maltese fever. And as he's sick, Paul comes and he's going to heal him. And if you guys remember the story from Luke chapter 4, Paul's on the brain. When Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law. Remember, after he heals her, he goes out, and all the people from the surrounding area come to Jesus, and he begins to heal everybody who's sick. Not just one or two people, not just the ones he liked, not just the easy cases. He healed each and every person who came to him. And so Paul is on the island, and he's healed Mr. P's dad, and so then all the sick start to come to Paul, and he heals them. Now, how many people is that? All of them, right? Everyone that's sick, all of them, not just some of them. He heals all of them. Every last one of them. Clearly, the Spirit is working through Paul in a miraculous way. But you know who also was with Paul at that time? Luke and Aristarchus. Now, why don't they heal anybody? Why do they make Paul do all the work? Why is he the only one who's healing people on the island? There's other believers there. Why aren't they doing the same thing that Paul is doing there? And the answer is, Paul is a capital A apostle with an asterisk. And just like the other capital A apostles, Paul has been given a special authority and a special commission from Jesus that's different than what Timothy had, or Luke had, or Aristarchus had, or you have, or I have. It doesn't mean that God doesn't heal. We've seen him do miracles of healing in this church. Aubrey Mann, if you remember her a while back, she was born without much of a diaphragm, and God healed her. We saw that happen. So God does heal. It's just in a different way than what we see with Jesus or Peter or Paul. Now, the purpose of miracles for Paul and for Jesus and for Peter and for Philip, we even saw him do some healing. What was the purpose of the healing, of the miracles they performed? To do some cool stuff, right? No, it was to authenticate the messenger and his message. So when I saw a miracle happen, I knew that what the guy was saying was true. So when Jesus tells you he's the Son of God, come down to take away the sin of the world, and he performs all these miracles, what are you supposed to believe? Good, he's the Son of God who came down to take away the sin of the world. That's what you're supposed to believe. And so when Peter or Paul or Philip did those miracles, they were pointing you to a guy named Jesus, and they were saying he actually came and he died on a cross and he was raised the third day so he could take away your sins. So you would believe the message that he gave. So no doubt, as Paul is healing these folks on the island, it's not just a, hey, hope you go have a great day. He's actually using it as an opportunity, a platform to share with them the gospel, the real hope that they have. Because 100% of the people that God healed, guess what happened to them? They died. 100% dead. Lazarus, dead. 100% of the folks who received healing, dead. Man, that's kind of morbid, isn't it? But it's a reminder death is one for one. Right? And that's actually good news. I've only been in this old thing about 50 years, and I'm already ready to turn it in. Right? I want the new model. I want one that doesn't get old and break down. I want one that's not going to wear out. Our hope is not that we're going to limp along a few more years. That somehow we'll stretch this life out, because this isn't it. Our hope is new life. Our hope is the resurrection. In a body that doesn't break down. In a kingdom that lasts forever. That is our hope. That was their hope too. That's what Paul shared with them. That's why the what are you going to do with Jesus question is so terribly important. Let's take a look at verse 11. At the end of 3 months, we set sail on an Alexandrian ship which had wintered at the island and which had the twin brothers for its figurehead. After we put in at Syracuse, we stayed there for 3 days, and from there we sailed around and arrived at Rhegium. And a day later, a south wind sprang up, and on the second day we came to Puteoli. There we found some brethren and were invited to stay with them for 7 days, and thus we came to Rome. And the brethren, when they heard about us, came from there as far as the market of Appius and 3 inns to meet us. And when Paul saw them, he thanked God and took courage. When we entered Rome, Paul was allowed to stay by himself with a soldier who was guarding him. 3 months on the island of Malta. I can't help but think about when I was a kid growing up, there was this TV show called Gilligan's Island. I guess that would make Mr. P actually Mr. Howell, right? But anyway, 3 months on the island of Malta, and when they get ready at the end of the winter time, they find out there's another ship that's there, right? Another Alexandrian grain ship that has enough room to carry 276 people up to Italy. And this ship had as its figurehead the twin brothers, which the figurehead's kind of the funny-looking thing on the front that looks like a statue. Twin brothers, you can think of the constellation Gemini, kind of the same idea. And it was believed that this figurehead, these twin brothers, then would grant you safe passage in the sea. They would give you good fortune if you were a sailor. Of course, we know, right? That's a superstition thing, but we know it's God who's telling this story, right? He's been telling it all the way through. And he hasn't relied on good luck charms. And he hasn't relied on superstition, but God is the one who says and the one who does. And he's the one who's brought them safely to where they're going to go. So they land at this place called Puteoli, another funny word to say. When they get there, there's some believers there. And when Paul sees these believers, he's going to see some at Puteoli, he's going to see some at the Appius Market, and he's going to see some at 3 Inns. So they're along the way, he's going to run into believers each time. And you know what happens every time he sees a new group of believers? He says he thanks God and he takes courage. He thanks God and he takes courage. And it's a reminder that the importance of when we say time with other believers, that's important. It's super important. For Paul, it was wind in his sails. It was a shot of adrenaline. It was a Red Bull. I don't know what you want to call it. It was something that got him ready for the next stage of the journey. Time with other believers. And I know when I've had a hard week, our small group, when I'm there, I thank God for them because they're an encouragement, right? They encourage me to keep fighting the good fight. Now notice I didn't say fight on. The bear in me wouldn't allow me to say that. Just kidding. No, I'm not. Okay. And it's also a good reminder, we talked about transforming families to live and love like Jesus, that this is a great picture of a family. Right? As Paul's going, it says that for 7 days, they put them up, right? The believers up. So to put somebody up for 7 days and to put up with somebody for 7 days, that's some love right there. Especially when they're your relatives, right? That's a big deal. But they put up Paul for 7 days. And then we're told that they traveled from these 2 other places to meet him along the way. They traveled 30 to 40 miles at a time where they couldn't just jump in the car and ride down, but they traveled a significant amount of time just to see Paul on his way up. And he wasn't alone when he walked into Rome, that this huge entourage went with him, that he entered Rome with his family, that the church was there for him. That's a reminder. We've said this before, but we're going to do it again. Turn to the folks around you real quick and just say, hey, family. Now turn to somebody who's not actually your immediate family and say that to them. You know what's awesome is that that's true, that each and every one of us, if we've trusted in Jesus, we've been adopted into God's family, and we're all brothers and sisters, which means you never have to be alone. And Paul, after this long journey that at times probably felt like he wasn't going to make there, finally he gets to Rome. And Paul, as we looked at his journey and this time, many times it seemed like his life was in peril. We began to wonder, is Paul going to make it to Rome? Right? The Jews were out to get him. And then you have this huge storm that threatens to overwhelm the crew and everybody on board the ship. And the sailors decide, you know what, we better kill these guys so they don't get away. And then a snake bites him when he finally almost gets there. And we keep going, man, is this guy going to make it? But you know what? His life was never in danger. It's a weird thing to say, but his life was never in danger. Because God said, Paul, you're going to appear in Rome. And Paul believed that what God said, God would do. And though God did not save Paul from the storm, he saved him through the storm. Because see, here's the thing. God is the one who's telling the story. Right? He was telling Paul's story, but he's telling your story too. And I don't know where your story is right now. I don't know what you're facing. I don't know what storm you might be in, but here's the good news. God does. And even more than that, as the hurricane force winds beat against you, and as the waves feel like they're crashing over you, and you feel like you're drowning, and you don't know which way's up, He does. And that He will save you through the storm. And there's something He wants to do while you're in that storm. There's something He wants to do in you, and there's something He wants to do through you. Because believe it or not, the storm is a very important part of the story He's telling through your life. And you may not realize that right now, and you may not want to hear that right now. But He wants to use that, and that assumes that you're going to run to Him and not away from Him. That you're going to cry out to Him and not shake your fist and cry out against Him. We talked about this before, about the furnace, right? The storm, that it can either destroy you or it can purify you. It can either turn you to ash or it can make something beautiful out of you. What is it doing for you? And here's the other thing. The storm is providing an opportunity that you would have no other way. It's providing a platform that you would not have if you weren't in that storm. But the thing is, you got to lift your eyes up and you have to look around you and see that you're not the only one going through this time. There's other folks that need encouragement. There's other folks that need to know the hope that you have. And I will tell you this, the storm, it's in the storm that people see your faith is real. It's in the storm that people see that the hope that you say that you have is real. They'll know it no other way. With that, I want to invite up a good friend and a brother of mine, Tacho Gallegos, to share his story.
Good morning. My name is Anastasia Gallegos. Most people here know me as Tacho, which is short for Anastasia. I was born here in California in 1972, which makes me 46 years old. I tell you my age because when you get to this age, there's a lot God has done in your life. And trying to get it down to fit in about 750 words is not easy. As I started to look at my life and journey the Lord has led me through, the more I feel like it is not just my personal testimony, but it is really a testimony of His faithfulness. I was born and raised the first 7 years of my life in the San Fernando Valley. From my earliest memories, I can remember that my parents had a turbulent marriage. They argued and fought a lot. I did not know it was a bad marriage they had, since my parents' marriage was the only one I knew. So it didn't really affect me at the time. All I knew was that they were my parents and I felt secure with them. Eventually, my dad would be unfaithful to my mom, once when I was younger, and a second time when I was about 14 years old. It was during the second time, when they were on the verge of divorce, that I can look back and see God intervening. At the time, you do not see the hand of God moving, especially if you don't even really know Him or think about Him. But looking back, this is the first time I would say I could clearly see God coming in and putting my life on a trajectory that would lead me to Him and continues to lead me to Him. It was at this time that God brought a man in our lives who started to share the gospel with my parents. And for the first time in our lives, we started to attend a church that was focused on teaching out of the Bible. We did not know at the time it was a legalistic church, but it did introduce us to Jesus. And at the age of 15, I knew I wanted Jesus in my life, and I wanted to follow Him. It was also at this time that I met my wife, Anna. We both met in church and eventually got married at ages 18 and 19 years of age. As our family grew, God was not done directing our paths to bring us closer to Him. In 2005, we knew we had to leave the legalistic church we were in and needed to find a healthy church where we could grow and be fed spiritually. Not knowing how to go about finding a good, healthy church, we asked our 2 older boys to ask some of their friends who they thought were sincere Christians which church they attended. And both of them, who were in different grades and had different friends, both said Central Christian Church. After attending services a few times, we knew this was a church where we should be attending. At this time, we had 5 children: Andrew, Michael, Matthew, Amber, and Nathan, who was just a few months old. We didn't know exactly how to get plugged into a church this size, so Anna started attending MOPS, and I started to attend a man's Bible study. Years went on. We had our 6th child, Taylor, and the kids continued to grow. We were somewhat active in the church, and life seemed to kind of go on with its normal ups and downs that life seems to go on with. Now, this is a part that is a little difficult for me. I still remember vividly how we came to church Christmas Eve of 2016. We were all together here for Christmas Eve service. We went back home, had dinner together. All was well. Everyone in the family was well when we went to bed. Early Christmas morning at around 2:15 a.m., our lives were changed forever. Our son Matthew, who was 18 years old, mysteriously fell out of bed and stopped breathing. Our son Michael, who shared the room with him, began to give him CPR. The paramedics came and tried to revive him, but they couldn't. Just like that, out of nowhere, our son, who was active in church and living a vibrant life, was gone. At that time, we didn't know what had happened. What could have caused this? For 3 months, we didn't know. Eventually, we would find out that he died from an abnormal formation of arteries and veins in his brain called arteriovenous malformation of the brain. Nothing in life can prepare you for something like this. It was something that we could in no way anticipate or prepare for. Our lives were turned upside down. Everything around us was changed. Familiar, yet everything seemed different. I remember Anna and I talking with each other. We had a choice to make. Did we choose a path where we blamed God and walk away from Him, or do we search Him out even more? The decision was easy to make. One path leads to hopelessness and despair, and the other one led to hope and life. We chose to look for God in the midst of what for us felt like nothing but turmoil. God did not abandon us. Faithful to His word, the church surrounded us, ministering to us in this, the greatest time of our need we were going through. Even to this day, Anna and I marvel at the way we were surrounded by His church. We were not alone. There was not one day for over 3 weeks straight that there was not someone physically with us from church. We were being prayed for continually for a very long time, and it seemed that when we needed it most, someone would reach out to check and see how we were doing and would offer their prayers. It was those prayers that carried us. Not only did God show up through His church, but in our searching and wanting to know God through this, He has revealed Himself in ways I have never experienced before. Love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. I can honestly say I did not know what that was. I had not experienced the depth of love for Him. It was during this time that I had come to experience that love for Him. In my searching for Him through prayer, through reading of His word, and meditating on Him, He has revealed Himself and His love for me in such a way that my love for Him has become real and deep. God did not answer our question about why Matthew had to be taken at just 18 years old. Instead, He answers it with Himself, with His presence in our life. Ricky spoke a month or so ago about how suffering refines us and grows us in ways that no other experience can. That is a truth. In the midst of something so wrong and hard to go through, God has given us a closeness to Him that I know I could not have gained any other way. And this gives me hope, because I get glimpses of God now and can only imagine what it will be like when I see Him and experience Him fully revealed in eternity. I can truly look back in my life and see that God has been there and has been faithfully calling me to Him. At the high mountaintops and the low bottoms of the dark valleys, God has been with me. He is faithful in all his promises. My story is not over yet. God has brought me this far, and I know I can trust him through what will still be written in my life. So I ask you, have you trusted Jesus with your life? Are you trusting Jesus with your life? I hope you see that you can.
Thanks, Tacho. So we've talked a lot about circumstances and storms and chains and furnaces over the last couple of weeks. And I just want to give you an opportunity right now to spend some time in prayer. Like I said, I don't know what you're going through, but he does. And I want to give you some time to cry out to him. And not just to say, Lord, please get me through this, but as he's taking you through the storm, to say, Father, what are you trying to teach me through this? What do you want to accomplish in me and through me? And how might you display the gospel in a totally unique and an extraordinary way through my life, through the story that you're telling through me? I'll give you a few minutes and I'll close this. Father, I thank you for just the promise in your word that even when we feel lost and disoriented, when we feel alone and abandoned by others, that you are there. In the furnace, walking with us, holding back the waters. Ways we can't even imagine. Your word says that you sing and dance over us with songs of deliverance and that you delight in your children. And sometimes we forget that. That through it all that you're making us and forming us and forging a faith that is strong and pure. That you want to use us to demonstrate to a world that is so dark and skeptical and hopeless and helpless that you are here, that you are real. That hope is available, that salvation can be had in your Son, Jesus. And so, Father, I pray that you give us courage in the midst of whatever it is we're facing today, just to do that well, to cling to you, to lift our eyes up and see those around us and look for the opportunities to offer a word of encouragement or of hope. That they may see that the faith that we have is real, the hope that we have is real, that the God that we serve is the living and true God. I pray these things in Jesus' name.